Have you ever felt that the world is changing rapidly and intensely, that everything around us seems to be following an increasingly unpredictable path? And what if I told you that more than 2,000 years ago, Jesus had already spoken about all of this? In chapter 24 of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus left behind a surprising prophecy. He described a series of events that would take place before a major moment in human history: wars, famines, earthquakes, spiritual deception, the rise of hatred, and the coldness of the human heart. Could these signs already be happening? Every day we hear news about conflicts, crises, disasters, and changes that seem out of control. Many people sense that we are living in different times that challenge our understanding. But the big question is, what does all of this mean? In this video, we will dive deep into this prophecy and analyze together each of the signs that Jesus mentioned. We will compare his words with current world events and understand what no one is seeing about Matthew 24. But there is something very important you need to know. This is not a reason for fear, but for awareness. Jesus did not leave us these warnings to alarm us, but so that we could be prepared and confident, so that we would know how to act, how to strengthen our faith, and how to find peace even in times of change. And that is why understanding this prophecy can completely transform your view of what is happening and what is yet to come. If all of these signs are already before our eyes, what should we do? If you want to understand Jesus' revelations about our times and discover the true meaning of Matthew 24, stay with me until the end of this video, because after today, you will see the world with different eyes. To understand the prophecy of Matthew 24, we need to go back in time. We need to put ourselves in the place of those who heard these words for the first time. Imagine the scene. Jesus is at the temple in Jerusalem, the spiritual and religious center of the Jewish people. The disciples are in awe of the grandeur of the structure, a symbol of power and faith. But suddenly, Jesus says something shocking. Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. Matthew 24:2. This was unthinkable. The temple was the heart of Israel. How could it be destroyed? The disciples were unsettled, confused, and then when they reached the Mount of Olives, a place of reflection and prayer, they asked the great question, "Tell us, when will this happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Matthew 24:3. And that was when Jesus began to reveal the signs. Now, here's something that many people don't realize. This prophecy has layers. It doesn't apply to just one specific event, but to different periods in history. The destruction of the temple happened in 70 AD, when the Romans, led by General Titus, invaded Jerusalem and devastated everything. For the Jews of that time, it felt like the end of the world. But Jesus wasn't only speaking about that moment. He was speaking about something much greater. Many Bible scholars interpret Matthew 24 in three main ways. One, preterism, believes that everything Jesus said has already been fulfilled, especially with the destruction of Jerusalem. Two, futurism holds that Matthew 24 refers to events that are yet to come, particularly the period of the Great Tribulation. Three, historicism sees the prophecy as something unfolding throughout history, from the time of Jesus to the present. But here's the question: what if all these interpretations are interconnected? What if Jesus was warning us about a prophetic pattern where certain events repeat until the final climax? When we look at history, we see that the signs of Matthew 24 have appeared in various moments: the fall of the Roman Empire, the world wars, pandemics. But what makes today so different? Simple. The speed and intensity with which everything is happening. Never before has humanity seen so many global crises emerging simultaneously. Never before have we had so much technology to connect and divide the world. Never before have we been so dependent on fragile systems that could collapse overnight. And what if we are living through the final version of these events? In the next chapters, we will analyze each of the signs Jesus mentioned, and you will decide whether we are truly approaching the prophesied moment. Jesus began his prophecy with a very clear warning. Watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming, I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. Matthew 24:4-5. And this is one of the first pieces of evidence that we are living in prophetic times. Spiritual deception has never been more powerful and widespread than it is today. Throughout history, false messiahs have appeared. Charismatic leaders who attracted crowds with promises of salvation and utopias. But never before have these lies had such a global reach. Think about it. Today, with just one click, anyone can become a spiritual leader and spread doctrines that have nothing to do with the truth of Christ. Social media is filled with distorted teachings, false promises of instant prosperity, and even new religions that completely reject the message of the gospel. And it doesn't stop there. History has already seen figures who claim to be the reincarnation of Christ, like Jim Jones, who led more than 900 people to suicide in a deadly cult in Guyana, or David Koresh, who manipulated his followers until a fatal tragedy in Texas. But today's deception is even more subtle. It's not just about individuals claiming, I am the Christ, but about ideologies that take the place of God in people's minds. Many do not realize that they put their faith in money, technology, science, or political leaders, hoping that these things will bring peace and salvation. And what happens when people are deceived? They drift away from the truth. They become vulnerable to any narrative that sounds appealing to their ears. Jesus warned us about this, and he said that this deception would mislead many. But what happens when these illusions start to crumble? When fear replaces security and instability becomes the new reality? The answer lies in what Jesus said next. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Matthew 24:6. Human history has always been marked by conflicts. But are the events we are witnessing today different? Are geopolitical tensions, technological advancements in warfare, and the growing climate of uncertainty pointing to something greater? The prophecy continues, and the next sign that Jesus revealed may be one of the most alarming of all. Wars bring destruction, but their effects go far beyond the battlefield. They leave deep scars on nations, leading to shortages, economic collapse, and mass suffering. And this is exactly what Jesus prophesied. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. Matthew 24:7. Famine has always existed, but today we are witnessing something unprecedented. Despite advances in agriculture and technology, millions of people still suffer from hunger. Economic crises, climate change, and wars disrupt essential supply chains. Entire countries collapse, leaving entire populations at the mercy of extreme hunger. And it's not just the lack of food that is alarming, it's the inequality in its distribution. While tons of food are wasted in developed countries, other regions suffer from absolute poverty and malnutrition. But Jesus didn't just mention famine. He spoke of plagues. In recent years, we have seen epidemics and pandemics bring the world to a halt. The impact of COVID-19 was a warning of how a single virus can cause global chaos, collapse economies, and transform the lives of billions of people. And what more awaits us? Scientists warn about the emergence of new diseases becoming increasingly resistant to treatments, while laboratories study viruses and bacteria that could be used as biological weapons. We are facing a dangerous scenario. And then there's another aspect of this prophecy, earthquakes. If we analyze records from the past centuries, we will notice that both the frequency and intensity of earthquakes have increased. This massive destruction, cities reduced to rubble in seconds, tsunamis wiping out entire communities. But is this just a natural cycle of the earth? Or are we witnessing something much greater unfolding before our eyes? The answer may lie in how all of this is interconnected. Famine, pandemics, and natural disasters are not isolated events. They create a domino effect. Where there is hunger, there is revolt. Where there is disease, there is despair. Where there is destruction, there is social collapse. And this scenario leads directly to the next sign Jesus mentioned, the persecution of Christians and the growing intolerance against those who remain faithful. If the challenges so far have been difficult, what comes next could be even more concerning. The signs are becoming increasingly evident. Famine, plagues, and natural disasters are not just isolated tragedies. They create an environment of instability and fear. And it is in this scenario that another warning from Jesus is fulfilled. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. Matthew 24:9. For centuries, the persecution of Christians has been a reality. From the first disciples who faced the Roman Empire to the great persecutions under dictatorships and totalitarian regimes. But never before has this persecution been so global and so disguised. Today, millions of Christians face physical persecution, being imprisoned or even killed in countries where their faith is forbidden. But there is a more subtle, silent form of persecution, and perhaps one even more dangerous. We live in a time when Christian values are mocked. Faith is being erased from the public sphere, and those who remain faithful are labeled intolerant, outdated, or extremist. Social media platforms censor Christian voices. Laws are being created to limit religious freedom of expression. All of this is happening gradually, almost imperceptibly, but the objective is clear: to silence those who follow Jesus. But Jesus had already warned us about this. He said that in the last days, many would be hated because of his name, that people would betray one another, that love would grow cold. And this is exactly what we are seeing. Intolerance is growing. Division among people has never been stronger. Respect for others is disappearing. Violence, corruption, and selfishness are taking over society, and all of this leads us to a crucial point. Love is growing cold. The world is becoming a colder, more hostile place. People are becoming more individualistic, insensitive, and distant from one another. Jesus said this would happen. But what happens when humanity loses its ability to love? What happens when people's hearts become cold and indifferent? The next sign gives us the answer. Imagine a world where people no longer care for one another, where compassion is rare, empathy is replaced by selfishness, and the suffering of others becomes just another passing headline. Now look around you. That world is already here. Jesus warned us about this. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. Matthew 24:12. This may be one of the most painful and evident signs of prophecy. The loss of love does not happen overnight. It is the result of accumulated injustice, corruption, and sin. In ancient times, communities were united. Families stayed close. People cared for each other. But something changed. Today, human relationships have become disposable. Mass divorces, broken homes, superficial friendships. Parents and children are increasingly distant. The concept of commitment has been replaced by the desire for convenience. And where there is no commitment, love dissolves. Social media, which was meant to bring people together, has actually created emotional barriers. We are more digitally connected than ever, yet loneliness has never been greater. The coldness of society is visible everywhere. In traffic, in lines, in social media comments. It takes only a small disagreement for hatred to explode. Respect for others is disappearing. Dialogue has been replaced by intolerance. But why? Because where love grows cold, selfishness increases. People are increasingly focused on themselves, trapped in their own interests, without time or willingness to help others. And this indifference spreads like a silent disease. Violence no longer shocks us. Brutal crimes are reported daily, and many simply ignore them. A cry for help on the street often goes unnoticed. Someone suffers a tragedy and is soon reduced to just another statistic. But Jesus' prophecy does not end here. Even in the midst of such coldness, he mentioned one last great sign, a sign that before the end, something extraordinary would still happen, and that is exactly what we will see next. Amidst so many dark signs, wars, famines, earthquakes, persecution, and a world growing colder, Jesus mentioned something surprising, a sign that is not about destruction, but about hope. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Matthew 24:14. Before the end of times, the gospel will be proclaimed to all nations. But how could this be possible? For centuries, the first Christians faced challenges in spreading the message of Jesus. In the early years of the church, the preaching of the gospel was limited to small regions of the Roman Empire. During the Middle Ages, missionaries had to travel for months or even years to reach new peoples. The translation of the Bible into different languages was a slow and laborious process. But today, something extraordinary is happening. Technology has eliminated geographical barriers. Now, the Word of God can be transmitted to any corner of the planet in seconds. With just a single click, videos, sermons, testimonies, and Bible studies reach millions of people at the same time. The Bible, once accessible to only a privileged few, is now translated into more than 3,000 languages and can be read for free by anyone with a smartphone or computer. Platforms like YouTube, social media, and Bible apps are helping to spread Christ's message to places where missionaries cannot physically go. Even in countries where Christianity is prohibited, many people are finding ways to access the gospel in secret. And there's something even more surprising. While in many places Christian faith seems to be declining, in other parts of the world it is growing like never before. Countries that once had few Christians are now seeing millions of conversions. In regions where persecution is intense, the church is growing silently, but powerfully. This means that we are witnessing the fulfillment of this prophecy before our eyes. The gospel is being preached like never before, and when this mission is complete, Jesus clearly told us, then the end will come. But what does this mean for us? What should we do now? If all the signs Jesus mentioned are happening before our eyes, how can we prepare? This is the most important question of all, and that is exactly what we will discuss next. Now that we have analyzed all the signs that Jesus revealed to us in Matthew 24, one question remains. What does the end that he mentioned actually mean? Many people think that Jesus was referring to the total destruction of the world, but the truth is much greater than that. The end that he announced does not mean annihilation, but rather the closing of a cycle and the beginning of something new. Just as a book has chapters, human history also follows a divine plan. And Matthew 24 shows us that we are approaching a transition to a new era. This end is actually a turning point where everything that has been prophesied will be fulfilled and God's kingdom will be fully established. For those who understand this message, there is no reason for fear, only preparation and hope. And this preparation is not just about being informed about the signs, but about strengthening our faith, living with purpose, and spreading love and truth to those around us. Jesus warned us not to cause anxiety, but to guide us on how to act. Now is the time to draw closer to God, to cultivate peace in our hearts, and to live according to the values of His kingdom. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who also needs to hear it. And before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more transformative content. Here at Inner Light Infinite Wisdom, we are on this journey together, seeking wisdom and spiritual awakening. See you in the next video. Until then, keep your vibration high and your mind connected to the divine.